Good morning, all of you. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to extend a hearty welcome to all of you for this session. Myself, Anju, Assistant Professor, Department of Information Technology. Today, we have an excellent session on blockchain, the key to cybersecurity. We have an eminent speaker for this session, Professor Shekhar Verma, IIT Allahabad. Shekhar Verma received the PhD degree in Computer Networks from the Indian Institute of Technology, Varanasi in 1993. He is currently working as professor with the Indian Institute of Information Technology, Allahabad. His research interests include machine learning, computer networks, wireless sensor network, information and network security, vehicular technology, and cryptography. On behalf of management of KCG College of Technology and Department of Information Technology, I welcome our speaker, Professor Shekhar Verma, for this forenoon session. Welcome you, sir. Now we can take over the session. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for being late. I was under the impression that the session will start at 12. And unfortunately, the net was not working from my home, so I rushed to my office. Here I am in my office, and I'll be talking about blockchain for IoT security. And before I start, I am sure that you had wonderful sessions before on, and you have all the basics of blockchain, all the IoT applications, and all other things which are required. So without much ado, let's go and have a tour. I wouldn't say a tour. That means I'll give you an overview of how blockchain can be applied and how it is being used in general security in IoT applications. So there are general applications in IoT. I'll just touch upon what is IoT, assuming that you already have a lot of knowledge about blockchain. If you have any questions, you can ask through the organizers, or I can take questions within the lecture itself, during the lecture, and after the lecture as well. So if the organizers wish to have any change, they are most welcome. And before we do anything, let me share my screen and we start. So let me start. Is my ma'am, is my presentation visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So the presentation is available. I'm Professor Shekhar Verma. I work in the area of, by the way, I work in the area of machine learning, IoT, and security. But I basically am a security person. So I'll be talking about a lot of things of security, and sometimes it might just sound a little trite, very banal. Sometimes it will seem to be a little out of reach. But believe me, you are in for a very exciting area that the organizers have chosen. And I'm thankful to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my thought. Some of our research work also in this area. So without much ado, let me start and let's see. So why blockchain and why IoT, and why we need to marry both of them? So we already know about blockchain. So for IoT, we find that we live in very interesting times. And we were in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, which is IT. So what was the first? What led to industrialization itself? So steam. Once the steam was there and you could generate energy, you could do a lot of things. You could automate a lot of things. But steam itself as a source of energy was very, very heavy, in the sense it required a lot of space. The amount of energy that was generated was not large. Then came electricity, and that revolutionized everything. Then what happened was that computers came. And what did computers really do? The computers injected what is control in the whole thing. We did not have unbridled things. We could control it on the fly. So not only that, we could get access to data. So this, with computers and with the internet, we could control the machines, and we could access the data. However, what happened was that the databases that we had were old. We wanted to have real-time data, not just real-time data flowing into us or flowing into our computer, but we wanted to have data on query. We wanted to have special data as per query and real-time data so that we could have real-time control. And with the Internet of Things, this has become possible. So my friends, this is the fourth industrial revolution. And the whole thing seems to be complete. The infrastructure, the communication infrastructure that machines could talk to machines is there. Initially, we could talk to each other over using a language. Then we had phones. Then we had mobiles. Now machines can talk to machines. Previously, we were talking to machines. Machines could talk to us. Machines could help us talk to one another, one person talking to another. But now the idea is that machines can talk to each other. And when machines talk to one another, the protocols change. However, that is not important from our point of view. Important thing is that we can program the machine to get query for data, talk to another machine, get data, process data, and control the other machines. So a computer as a machine can just get access to real-time data based on subscription or based on query and use that data to control other machines. So the human being is out of the loop. The human being is just a consumer now. The human being is a boss. It does not have to really be in the control loop. He is outside the control loop. So what happens now? So this seems to be very, very futuristic. This was futuristic a few years back. The idea, if you read my slide, the idea that you can, your fridge or the refrigerator connected to the internet and it is downloading data and ordering things on its own was laughable. That your bike could check what is the state of the petrol, what is the state of the different parts of the bike, whether your air pressure in the tires are sufficient or not. It seemed like a Bond thing. It seemed like a James Bond movie, even though then it looked a little far-fetched. And people said, why do we want that when we sit, the steering should tell whether I'm correct or not. The seat should be able to think whether I'm at the right height or not. But can we have such things? What is the need? Obviously, previously what used to happen, the need used to be the mother of invention. Now what has happened, the invention drives need, and that is what is Internet of Things. So now what has happened? The technology is there and we need to find out what are our needs around what is available, what technology is available. The invention is there. And look at a car now. Look at a Tata Nano car. It has more than 80 sensors on board. Look at an Audi or look at the most popular Swift Desire or some Hyundai car. It has hundreds of sensors connected to each other. And when hundreds of sensors form a network or a subnet within a car, so your car is a moving subnet, and you can query for data from that particular network and then use that particular data which is coming from a single car or multiple cars to have better driving experience, to have better roadside experience, to have better road safety, so on and so forth. And it is being projected that by 2020, we are going to have 60 trillion sensors. And that would be around 10,000 sensors per person. At the present moment, how much do we have? Our own mobile seems to have some 10 to 15 sensors. At the present moment, when it's a device which is outside. When we are going to wear these devices, then the number of sensors would really increase. and it will become the IoT, which would allow us to query these sensors, get real-time data, control everything, will become a part. It will become a part of our living. It will become a part of a living fabric. Everywhere. So then how do we define an IoT? Before we really go and see what is happening, let's define what is an IoT. So this Internet of Things is a cyber physical ecosystem. The physical gets intimately dovetailed with the cyber world, not through the human, without the human. It's an M2M communication, it's D2D communication, machine talking to another machine, device talking to another device, and will have it has a lot of interconnected sensors, not just sensors. So it's not a wireless sensor network, my friends. It also has actuators. That means it can actually take action on the basis of the sense data. And that is where the computers come in, or processing comes in. So you have data, you process that data in real time on the sensor devices itself, on the edge or on the cloud, and pass on the inference so that actuators can take action. And this allows us to do intelligent decision making. So machine learning, action of sensing, which is the physical to the electrical world, and from electric world to the physical world is the actuator. So let's see and have a look. What is a sensor? Something that senses the environment, monitors the environment and the context. So we can have accelerometers, which are very common today on our cars, on bikes. We can sense the outside environment for temperature, pressure for air pressure inside your tires, or the pressure which is being generated by a heart pump. This has become very important in the area of in the time of our COVID. We have light sensors to have ambient lighting in our home or ambient lighting on the stage. We have acoustic sensors. So we have sensors for practically everything. We can have measure physical, chemical, biological indicators, and we just not can sense and record. We can get this data on query. We can get this data on the fly by using the underlying communication network. So sensors by themselves existed, but dovetailed, integrated with a network is what is IoT. So here are the sensor for you. So here are a large number of sensors for a human being. We have airflow sensors, ECG, EMG, temperature, body position, sound sensor, snore sensor, alert patient button, blood pressure, so on and so forth. You name it, we have it. And just not sensors. All these are connected together to form an Internet of Things. And this Internet of Things can be queried, and then action can be taken. So the actuator is now very important part of the IoT system. It's a response system responsible, entity responsible for changing the electrical inputs into physical action. So we have electrical inputs. So the sensor takes the physical action, converts to the electrical part, communicates it over the net. The actuator does the reverse action. For example, some sensor is a patch is sensing how much is your sugar. The actuator is actually taking the data after decision making as to how much of insulin needs to be pumped into your body. And the human being is oblivious of things. He does not have to do anything. He is already outside the loop. His sugar is being controlled. he is not in the picture. What is he doing? He is sitting back, doing his work, enjoying. Does not need to worry about his sugar pricking himself or taking an insulin morning and evening. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. So he keeps sugar in his pocket or glucose in his left pocket, insulin in his right pocket. All that pocket is freed, and you can work while you enjoy without the hassle of thinking about your sugar. But then this is interesting because the endpoint devices, so the actuators can be there on these endpoint devices, or the action can be taken at the gateways. So one scenario can be that the car itself senses data, take actions. For example, it finds that somebody is trying to overtake, so automatically brakes would be on. It will find that somebody has braked suddenly, so your brakes autopilot comes and brakes you. But then when an accident has happened, it will just communicate it to the nearest RSU or gateway, which will call the ambulance, and the ambulance will come in. So it can take action on itself. It can take action on the gateway, which is nearby, or this is what is the edge. Or if it wants to find out what are the best restaurants which are nearby or 1 kilometer ahead, then through the gateway it can go to the cloud platform, find out what services are available, go back. So the entire ecosystem is in situ action on the sensor inside the IoT itself. Or if you want to do some computing, you can do it on the gateways or the RSUs in case of VANET. Or you can go to the cloud for some intelligent decision making, which might require a lot of computation. Or if you have to have a lot of data, or we wish to combine a lot of data, you could go to the cloud platform for backend and services. So this can be an Internet of Things in itself. With using the edge computing, it can become a complete system, or it can take the entire cloud also and use its data as well to become the entire ecosystem. So each one of them is complete in itself. So what is the vision? So the vision is to let people in smart things. Why smart things? Because they can communicate with one another, take action, and implement that action. So we let people and smart things to be connected. And now this is the grand dream. At any time, in any place, to anything or anyone. So this anytime was already a vision of the communication system. Any place was also a vision of the communication system, of the computer network. But to anything, this is entirely new. This is what is the advancement. Machine talking to machine, device talking to device, as I told you. And anyone, the human being is at the midst of things, but he's not participating. If he wishes to communicate and control, fine. Otherwise, he can just relax. And it will be across different networks. Even today, your Bluetooth communication can 3G, 2G, anything is talking to anyone. It will become seamless. And any place of earth, you can talk to anyone, and you can talk to your refrigerator, you can talk to your washing machine, you can talk to your watch, you can talk to your Fitbit device, whatever you wish to. So the applications can be any or everything can be an application. As you can see, right from your agriculture to your transport, to your wind energy, to the desert, to the military application, to fighting fires, to enjoying in a serene background, you can have a network helping you out, giving you information, controlling your device, controlling your health, so that we have a better place to live in. So this makes IoT an autonomous thing. It's an autonomous being. It can monitor itself. The machines can monitor themselves, diagnose problems, do intelligent decision making with machine learning and deep learning, reconfigure themselves, improve their environment, take action to improve the lives of human beings and the society. But this autonomy and this all pervasive nature comes with a threat. So there is a threat. And what is the threat? Let's see. So the threat is real. Why? Because a lot of data is flowing, a lot of control is flowing. So both data which is being generated, data which is flowing, the control which is flowing can be used by malicious entities. And this malicious entity can be a human being, can be another IoT behind which malicious beings are trying to use the data, not only passive data gathering to blackmail you later, but also to control the IoT itself. I'll give you an example. If you have a water network, or I'll give you an example which is already there and people are thinking that this is the work of a smart virus. Let's see it this way. You are going to buy something from the internet. You are on Amazon or you are on some e-marketplace. You are buying something and the person is able to monitor what you are buying. And he gets your data. While you are paying, it gets all the vital information which is required for paying. So once the virus gets into your system, it can take away your money, it can monitor your health, it can destroy you by taking away money or taking away your health. I'll give you a concrete example of the Iranian nuclear program. What the Iranians found, that the centrifuge which they were using for purifying uranium started running at sometimes it started running at a very high speed and used to break down. So they thought this is a problem of the centrifuges themselves. Why? Because so what used to happen when they used to high speed, instead of the speed coming out down at the right moment, it was the speed used to remain at very high RPM for longer times. Later, it was found that there's a virus called Stuxnet, which was not really a virus, it was a malware that just changed the control system. So it said that when the speed goes beyond, say, 100 RPM, instead of going back to 90 RPM, they used to say, go at 200 RPM. So the control system was captured. It was not a virus activity. It was just disturbing the control system. So these malware can do what? It can disturb, it can gather data. It can affect the flow of data. It can affect the flow of control. So let's see an example which I have written. So in the Mirai bottleneck hack, some 1.5 lakh cameras were hacked and turned into a botnet. And that blocked a large part of the internet in US way back. The NetPetya is a ransomware attack. What it does, it just goes into your system, encrypts the entire system, erases the key, quickly erases the key so that you don't have a memory dump of the key which is encrypted your data, and then ask for money. Ask for money in the cryptocurrency so that it's protected and nobody can trace where the ransom is coming from. And people are paying up, and then they'll give you a key which will unlock and decrypt your hard disk. And this is really, really crippling the manufacturing and port operations around the globe. So manufacturing is disturbed because your entire system is automatically and all of a sudden it's encrypted. And you cannot really break the encryption because encryption is strong. It's an AES encryption. And unless until you pay up using some privacy preserving cryptocurrency, you will not be able to decrypt your data and do it. So this is ransomware. And why it is there? Because the human being is absent from the loop. Because we are enjoying the fruits of IoT without looking at the threats. The threat was being ignored. So, what is the problem? The solution which came is a problem. Why? Because we have different heterogeneous devices talking to each other. A Wi-Fi device talking to a Bluetooth device, talking to another PAN device, talking to the landline, talking to 2G, talking to 3G, and machines talking to each other. So piecemeal they are secured, but when we don't have standard protocols so that they can communicate with each other. So what is the solution? How do people need to resolve this IoT security problem? So there are multiple solutions being proposed in the market. And one of the solutions which is really coming into the fore is connect the IoT with the blockchain. So I have not really gone into what is blockchain, but let me tell you in a few words, in a few sentences, just take 5 minutes of talking and tell you what is a blockchain and why are we really we want to connect to the blockchain. What are the properties of blockchain that we really want? Obviously, you may have had a lot of sessions telling you this, but let's take a 5-minute recap of what are the properties of the blockchain that we really want and that really has, so that we want to connect the IoT with the blockchain. So let's have a 5-minute peek. There are no slides, I'll just speak. So the idea is that the blockchain is a distributed database. It's a distributed ledger, number one. Number two, unlike the bank, which is a centralized database telling you where the money comes from, where the money goes, and maintains the integrity of the ledger, now everybody is a bank. All devices which are connected to the blockchain are the bank. That means they keep a complete copy of the same ledger. Now, how can you have the same copy of the ledger? We can all cooperate among ourselves. So cooperation becomes necessary so that we can have a synchronization protocol in which everybody says, okay, this is the transactions we have made. This is what data has been generated. And for integrity of the blockchain, that means integrity of the distributed ledger, everybody passes on to one another as to what are the transactions, and you keep a copy of the transaction. So this is one way, a cooperative way of keeping the same copy of the ledger at every place. But this is what is precisely we wanted to avoid. Why? Because in IoT, recognize in IoT, we have a distributed, truly distributed system. Likewise, the distributed ledger, which is keeping the data, is also on everyone. But as in IoT, one device does not know the other device. There is no cooperation, my friends. There is no trust, my friends. So in the absence of trust, how do we have the same database? How do we really maintain the integrity of the database? How can we reach a common, mutually agreed point or consensus, as it's called in blockchain, so that everybody has the same entries into the blockchain? I'll give you an example where it came from. So it's known as the Byzantine generals problem, in which there were three generals, and this is taught in computer science and everybody knows about it. There are three generals. They wish to attack a city at the same time and capture the city and then distribute the whatever goods they are going to get from the city. But the three generals don't believe in each other. They want to attack at some time. They decide that they'll attack at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And when they attack, one person does not attack. He comes at 3 o'clock. So his army is safe. Others have pushed in their army. So how do we ensure that there is a consensus between non-cooperative entities? That everybody is going to attack at 2 o'clock itself. And nobody can deny this. So this is a consensus problem between non-cooperative entities. And in our case, the blockchain, the entities who maintain the ledger are the non-cooperating, non-trustworthy entities. It is found that in a deterministic environment, the reaching consensus is an NP-hard problem. But going into the random world, going into the probabilistic world, we have seen that we can solve this problem by solving a cryptographic puzzle, by proof of work, proof of stake, proof of burn, proof of luck, proof of elapsed time, or some graph-based consensus reaching algorithms. So this seems to be so akin to IoT, where there are heterogeneous devices, not all cooperating. Everybody wishes to have the same ledger so that the integrity of the data is maintained. So what should we do? We attach the blockchain with the IoT, or rather the IoT is attached to the blockchain. And the problem of data integrity, the problem of sharing data, the problem of access control, the problem of confidentiality of data, the problem of privacy of data and entity is given through the blockchain. Why? But the blockchain is designed is to work in this particular environment, which is non-cooperative, asynchronous, non-trustworthy environment. And this is a solution which is already available. Before we go, every block is just a hash of the transactions. So it's immutable. Because of the pre-image resistance and the collision resistance, nobody can generate another block which has the same data. So different data, same block is very difficult to do. So we maintain a chain of hash of the transaction, which is called a block. And this is kept with everyone, and this is a blockchain. Remember, two buzzwords, rather three buzzwords. It's a distributed ledger where every entity maintains the same hash of the transactions. Everybody uses a proof of work type of probabilistic consensus reaching mechanism where cryptography replaces trust. So blockchain is an entity, is a particular technology. I wouldn't call it technology, but it's a technology wherein we don't have trust. We replace, I'll again repeat, replace trust by cryptographic tools. So how can we connect the IoT with the blockchain? So number one, as you can see, what we can do is we can have the gateway devices as endpoints to the blockchain. So the blockchain, instead of going and connecting to the individual IoT devices or the edge devices, we connect the gateway points or devices as endpoints to the blockchain. So these gateways are going to maintain the blockchain. Each one of them will have the same copy of the ledger. And who is going to update the blockchain? There will be a consensus mechanism running on these gateways. What else can be there? If you look at the IoT ecosystem, we can say, okay, why have just gateways? Why can't we have the edge devices as transaction issuers to the blockchain? Why not these edge devices themselves form a blockchain or become a part of the blockchain? So what we can have, these IoT devices, as you can see, these edge devices, your refrigerator, your camera, your television, your washing machine, they form a blockchain. And they maintain the blockchain. They're intelligent devices. They have memory. They can communicate. They can control. They can do hashing, and hence can be connected to a blockchain. But then what else can be there? We can have the edge devices connected as endpoints. So we can, instead of having the IoT edge devices as transaction issuers only, not for they'll just verify the blockchain. They'll not maintain the blockchain, but here they can be endpoints to the blockchain as well. And slight difference, but the idea is here that gateway devices can maintain the blockchain, or we can have a two-level blockchain where the IoT devices can initiate, or it can be transaction issuers, or can be pointed as end device. Endpoints themselves, they can maintain the entire blockchain. Or we can have a hybrid system. We can have multi-level blockchain. So the cloud maintains a blockchain. The devices or the edges all are a part of this blockchain, but the maintenance of the updation of the blockchain has to be done by the cloud or by the edge devices, who has, if we are less in number. The endpoints, the sensors, the IoT devices, or the things can verify, can keep a copy of the blockchain which pertains itself, but not the entire blockchain. So we also have this hybrid solutions, or we have this multi-level blockchain. We can have one blockchain at the level of the cloud, one blockchain or blockchains, different blockchains, and different parts of the subnets of the edge devices, which are a part. So the entire universe is not going to be a single blockchain, but we can have multiple blockchain at local level, at middle level, at the highest level, but they are all maintaining the same ledger. So I maintain and update my part. The devices themselves, which are very weak and small devices, can verify a transaction or verify the formation of a block, but they don't maintain it. The edge devices maintain it on their behalf. And it is also possible that we have one more level wherein the cloud can maintain it. So let's look at an infinite IoT network, for example, the VANET. Why should my car maintain the information pertaining to the car in US? No ways. So what I do is, in my city data or my section data, I maintain my local blockchain. But there's one more blockchain at RSU level. There's one more blockchain being maintained at a little higher level at the transportation authority level. And I as a car can just verify the transactions of the blocks which are going on and keep my part. Even then I may not keep my part. So this integration of the blockchain with the IoT is very, very important. But then how can we really have, how can we really see this solving my security problems? So let's see. And there's so many security problems, but let's see why we need these security problems and why they're coming from. And let's have a look before, because I've given a very long introduction, it seems. So let's go and head in first into the security issues. The first, data confidentiality and integrity. So number one, the data is being generated by the IoT devices or the things. Some of this data or a lot of this data are critically important, are something like for your eyes only, for your consumption only. So it needs to be, it's confidential, not only confidential in transit, but it should be stored confidentially. So the confidentiality in transit is taken care of by the communication system, the underlying 2G, 3G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever you have, that has all the wherewithal to keep your data confidential in transit. But when you store, you need to store it confidentially itself. So traditionally, we used to have a centralized storage, the cloud storage. The cloud would have a lot of security features. It will encrypt the data, it will have access control, so on and so forth. But a single point of storage will have a single point of failure or single point of vulnerability as well. So this centralized server is vulnerable and a single point of failure. It also causes congestion, because why are we doing IoT? Because we are generating a lot of data. We wish to use this data. So if the data is stored at one place, my friends, then everybody will be accessing that particular single point, and there'll be congestion, there'll be a lot of propagation, queuing delay, propagation delay, search delay, and obviously the system will not remain scalable. Even if you have a cloud everywhere, the cloud can be accessed from different positions. The searching problem, the storage problem, the scalability problem would still be there. Even though if we solve the communication congestion, but then searching the cloud, scaling this storage would remain a teething problem for all time. So centralized storage is a no-no for us. So what do we want? First thing we want to share data. So a primary objective of the IoT system is to share data between objects. And why? Because we want to give better service. We want to better our lives. So any data which is coming needs to be shared. There's one observation that 35% of the manufacturers rely on data produced by smart sensors for their operating processes. And this is quite recent, 2015-16. And this data is not for free. And we wish to have a convenient and fair trading mechanism to be able to use this particular data. Then we don't want unauthorized access to the resources. Anybody who wishes to access my resources or information must be authenticated. And even though he's authenticated, he must have authorization. I'll give an example. The students, your iCard that we have has two things. One, it authenticates you. It also authorizes you. So authentication of the student is done, but is not authorized to enter into my lab. So the authentication is important. The access control is also important. Now, in the traditional authentication system, we used to have an external entity would go to a centralized party for generation of access policies. It's role-based or whatever. And the centralized approach is the problem. And if you distribute it, then the problem of trust would be there. Somebody whom I can, a part of the network, a part of the IoT would become malicious, and because the owners are different, so one owner of a part of, say, the drone system becomes malicious, he wants to access data. So what is the solution? So we'll see the solution a little later, but what is the other problem? So data sharing creates a problem. But we want to share data. We cannot really shut off and live in isolation because the entire network is being created just for this. The authentication and access control is what is a problem in IoT. We want privacy. What kind of privacy do we want? We want both data privacy, the privacy of my data, and the privacy of the person who is generating the data. Otherwise, if I'm a patient or I am a car and everybody knows where I'm driving to, I would rather not share my data. So if I want to share my health data through a lot of devices connected to me, but if it is known that Shekhar Verma is going to has a blood pressure problem, has a heart problem, is bald, has a white beard, and he has so many other problems that I don't want to tell anyone, and that goes to the public and exposes my privacy and makes me a public entity, I will rather not share my data. So if my car is sharing the information about the road safety, or what are the restaurants and hotels and so many things around the hospitals, around the near the road, and everybody knows where Shekhar Verma is driving to, Shekhar Verma would rather not share this data. So entity privacy is equally important and is becoming more and more important along with this data privacy. But we need to share data, because the entire idea of this IoT is data acquisition, data processing, and data exchange. I want to earn from the data. I want to use this data for a better tomorrow, for a better road safety, for a better health of others and mine. So we cannot stop from data sharing. But my privacy of my data and myself is both important. And why this is important, as you can see, there is an example that the abuse of data is really important. For example, this is just a conjecture. People saying that smart toys like Barbie and other toys, they collect children's personal information and record children's voices when parents are unaware in order to make their business better. I don't want my child's voice to be recorded for posterity. I don't want how I'm keeping my child, what things I'm doing to make my child healthier. But somebody is stealing this information without my knowing is what is the data abuse. I remember Maruti and some car manufacturers used to, not really Maruti, but some car manufacturers in car expo shows used to keep microphones attached to the car, near the door, near the bonnet. So people, when they used to make comments about the car, they used to use this data. That is fine, but taking my private data is something which should be discouraged. And my privacy, both my data privacy and my privacy, is important. That privacy preservation is a challenge. So how does the blockchain help? So can blockchain, which is a distributed ledger, where every entity keeps the same data per force because they are forced into a mutual agreement through the consensus mechanism, and its lightweight data, can it help me solve my security problems? Can it allow me to share data without worrying about my privacy? Can it allow me to get a fair price for my data? Can it give me access control? Can it solve the distributed authentication problem? Can it do all these things? It has been doing it in blockchain domain. Can it do in the IoT with the integration I have just shown? So let's see. So when people dovetailed, and we have seen that the blockchain can be connected at the edge devices, the IoT device itself, at the edge computing devices, at the cloud itself, and there can be multi-level blockchains also. One blockchain can talk to another blockchain. So usually the security IoT framework has 4 layers. One is the physical layer, wherein we actually collect data and pass it on to the communication layer, which transfers this data. And then we have the database layer, where we keep data. Not only just keep data, but keep information about the data, which is the distributed ledger. And we have the applications on top. And security needs to be provided at all these levels. I'll not be talking about a lot of things, but remember, the data is being generated, the data is being stored and transferred, the data is being kept, the data is open for intelligent processing and inferencing, and it is done as per the applications which exist. Smart home, smart city. So let's talk of how blockchain applications are coming up for data confidentiality and integrity. So this is one framework, one framework which has been proposed for data integrity and confidentiality in a data sharing mode. And I'll be talking about data sharing. Half these slides would be on data sharing. So let's see, how do we really do data sharing? So we have the blockchain here. We have the blockchain. The blockchain are connected to these peers, which form a peer-to-peer network. Some of the nodes are honest. Some of the nodes are malicious. Some of the nodes are rational network nodes which analyze everything. They are actually the users of data. So I have an IoT system which has cameras, which has my mobile, which is my printer, which is generating a lot of data, and it's outsourcing data. And I wish that only legitimate persons use my data, number one. They pay to me for my data, and my data is not used in any other manner which I have not allowed. So the data is collected by IoT devices encrypted. First thing that we do for confidentiality is to encrypt data. So we encrypt data. The peers, these are the peers. Some of them are honest, some of them are malicious, few of them are malicious rather, and there are some rational nodes. So peers in a P2P system need to commit the space they possess by generating a space to prove their claims and their deposits. So idea is that these nodes need to prove that they are this place, and they prove their legitimacy, that they can be a legitimate users of this data. So they wish to, how can they prove? They need to have a commitment protocol. So they commit that they are at this particular place, their location of proof of space. I will not go into proof of space, but they'll use proof of space because you have already had sessions on blockchain. So peers will commit the space by generating some proof of space to claim their claims, and then they'll make deposits. So a priori deposits need to be made so that the data, the price of the data is paid. See, what was the problem in e-market, e-commerce? Suppose I am selling something on the e-market portal. You pay for say a refrigerator, and I don't send the refrigerator, or I send chappals instead of refrigerator. What can you do? So you say, okay, I'll pay only when I have received the product. I send the refrigerator, you don't pay. Then what will happen? So how do you solve this problem? This problem in e-commerce was solved before the trust was made. Now Amazon people comes and give, because there's a trust in Amazon. Now what happens? At that time, we used to have a bank. The bank used to take money from us, and once the product used to arrive, the money was transferred to the seller. So the buyer used to give, and all those who are in industry, all those who are in teaching would know that even today when we import something from a foreign country, we open a letter of credit, it's called LC. We give a letter to the bank saying that, okay, we are buying this thing, so much of money is committed. So that bank informs the seller, says, okay, he has deposited the money. So they send the goods. Once they send the goods, I'll say, okay, these goods are in order. So the bank releases the money. So there is a middleman. There is a trusted middleman. I have to trust the bank. They need to trust the bank. But in IoT environment, there is no trustworthy or trusted authority. So we use cryptography. What do? See, we commit on the blockchain. So blockchain is actually something is what is doing, it's replacing the centralized trusted authority. So if I wish to share the data, I wish to outsource the data to these peers, first they'll have to prove that they are there. So what do? They commit the space, and they have a proof of space to prove their claims and make deposits. So they need to deposit something as a guarantee, and this that they have made a deposit is to be proved, is to be committed on the blockchain. So the miners are there. These are the rational devices, rational or others, honest, and anybody who wins the consensus mechanism, they what do? They validate the transaction after checking the verifications. So this proof of space is done, and then link the valid transaction in the blockchain. So the transaction that the money has been committed is done. So the IoT users announce T-store. So they are again now the IoT devices here, they give you a T-store. That means they have a transaction T-store. This T-store, these T-store, they claim the required fees. The miners, they match the requirements and service in the transaction and offer storage. So the transaction has been done by the potential buyer. The offer of the data is given by the T-store, by the IoT network, and the entity in the IoT network who's selling the data. Then when the IoT users check the integrity of the outsourced data, so the integrity of the outsourced data is checked by a T-challenge, which is issued by the IoT system to the peers who wish to use the data. And the miners who store the data compute a proof that yes, the integrity of the data is there, and this put it on the blockchain. Once this is put on the blockchain, this T-challenge verifies the integrity of the data which is to be, and who verifies it? The peers. They verify that the data is to be given is not, I promise you 10 gigabytes of data, I give you 1 gigabyte. So this challenge is to verify that the same data is to be given. Suppose I have 10 GB of data, I hash and give a hash value. These peers, they say, okay, 10 GB of data, they keep a hashed value. Now, because of this commitment, you cannot give any other data. The IoT system cannot give any spurious data to this set of people. So after this has been done, the data, the verification is done, then the data is given. Now, if the proof does not pass the verification, then the transaction in the T register, the transaction in the T register, these fellows who have made the transaction and put some money as a guarantee money in the blockchain is forfeited. And this is awarded to the users as a punishment for miners who host the data. So anybody who's hosting the data, and if the proof does not pass the verification, it is forfeited. If the miners want to revoke the storage space, they produce a T cancel and withdraw the deposit in the T register. So not only the IoT system may be penalized for giving wrong data, but the buyers who take the data and do not pay, because then they can be also be penalized, and they can just be revoke the storage space, and for that will just produce a transaction T cancel and withdraw the deposit. So there is, through the blockchain, the integrity. What we are doing, we are first registering, making a deposit here. And if then this person outsource also through T store and T challenge tell you that yes, I'm going to transfer the data I asked for. Then if he does not make the proper data transfer, he is penalized of the money he has committed through T source. If this person is not legitimate, he can withdraw at any point and get back his deposit. So both of them, there is no way that peers can cheat, because they've already made a deposit and the data is transferred and its legitimacy is checked. The money is automatically transferred to the IoT system. But if the IoT system commits that I'm going to give this data, does not give the data, then the miners, when they verify that the data integrity is not there, the data from the IoT system would be penalized and they'll forfeit their deposit. I think this is one way in which data, as you can see, the data sharing is being taking place. The confidentiality of the data has been maintained because the data is encrypted in transit. The integrity is maintained by T-store and T-challenge and verified by the miners. And if the IoT system does not give proper data, then the IoT system is penalized. If there's no way that commitment made by the users who are given proof of space, and if they do not do it, they need to pay. And the centralized entity, which might be a middleman, is done away with. So you can share data confidentially, and the integrity of the data cannot be challenged. Similar thing people have proposed. How do we share data and how do you trade data? Now we are not just sharing data, we are also getting money for the data. So let's have one proposal which has been there and it's being used all the time at every place. Let's have a look. So again, I invoke the blockchain, and it can be done, the sharing can be done, and trading of data can be done in a transparent and accountable manner. For example, a hospital has ECG sensors data. It wishes it to give it to a research industry or academia for research on ECG. And I, as a researcher in biomedical engineering, I wish to get this data for my research and I need to pay it. So a user wishes to sell. So the hospital, what it does, it can post a transaction through the network edge to the blockchain with a desire, with an intent to sell data and claiming that it has data. So I'll just show you the figure. So the seller first makes an intent that it needs to and puts something on the blockchain. So what happens now? I am an interested user. I post a transaction. I make a deposit. I make a deposit of I commit a deposit to request for the data. So I, as a buyer, I make a deposit of D dollars. How do I do it? I have my input, which contains my ID. I have my own public key. A public key and private key pair. I sign my deposit through my private key. I sign it and give it. And for access control, I know that this particular thing is valid for a particular period of time, and I made a commitment for a valid period of time. So if the time exceeds, my deposit will automatically come back to me, and I have committed D dollars by signing it with my private key, and this which is verified by the blockchain. So I'll go back, and so what happens? An interested party can post a transaction. So I'm a potential buyer. I post a transaction, deposit, and commit a deposit. I usually don't really deposit, but I commit a deposit requesting for the data. Now I have made a claim. The seller says, okay, the deposit is fine. This was what I wanted, and this is what I had advertised. Then he can post a transaction with an updated access control. So the data owner now, what happens to the data owner? The data owners find that, okay, this is fine. So this gives access control. So this gives access, this IDA, this is the access control which is being given for a time period to the buyer. So the data owner posts a transaction with updated access control, which includes the request of the requester. The blockchain would verify that the requester can access the data. Now, for the integrity of the data, the blockchain verifies whether the data integrity is there or not. So that somebody is not just pushing some. So the seller is not pushing some invalid or some spurious data. And the blockchain will verify the requester can access the data. If yes, if this data can be accessed by the buyer and this is verified by the blockchain, then it passes on D dollars to the seller. And because now the blockchain has been able to find out that the transaction of the access control is valid or not. So the deposit is sent to the access control, and what happens is that this particular person then is able to access the data from the access control. So the blockchain is able to check the access control, check the integrity of the data for time t. Now, if the seller does not provide the data within the time, then automatically the blockchain deposits back the data with the buyer. So what the buyer has not been able to do, this particular seller says, okay, I'm selling data. We never gives the data. Then what happens? The buyer gets back the data after a period of time if the transaction has not been done. And this is automatically done by the blockchain itself. It unlocks, and after time t, it gets back money. So let's look at another data sharing framework. A similar idea, but same thing is happening, wherein this uses the idea of fair exchange, which is already there in Ethereum most of the time. So it's there in Ethereum. So what happens? That again, the same thing. The data owner collects data, shares the data at a price of, so all transfers are going to be made in terms of the in terms of the bitcoins or the cryptocurrency, shares the data at a price. In order to ensure fairness between the seller and the buyer needs to make some deposit, as he had already seen, and this is another one. So it commits the money. The value is D Bitcoin in cryptocurrency, and the whole thing is now here. The difference is the whole thing is being managed by a smart contract. So we know that smart contract in blockchain is a program written in a Turing incomplete language, which is very, very important. So the special type of language, for example, in Ethereum, we have Solidity. And the whole thing here is being managed by a smart contract, which takes care of all transactions, all things. And this ensures, so what is the fairness? You deposit money and it checks it checks whether the money is less or not, the program itself, and then it passes on the commits. The deposit can be forwarded. So here, what is happening? A timed commitment is made. A timed commitment is made on the basis of some predefined kind. The seller can redeem the deposit if she honestly pays the seller within time, and the deposit is forwarded back, and everything here as against the previous application wherein the blockchain was making interventions at different points of time. This is all there in a single smart contract, and the deposit is made, and then and what happens, the depositor can forward to the seller after time t with her signature on the transaction fuse. So this commitment is made, only commitment is made through the smart contract. So here the integrity of the data is not being checked. Here the what happens is a variation. The fuse command allows the buyer to allow the transfer of the money which it has committed after issuing a fuse command. So in this, if a seller signs the fuse transaction before time t, it is invalid because it cannot pass the verification of the miners. This ensures that a malicious buyer cannot harm the seller. So what is happening here is that the buyer takes the data but does not pay. So it cannot really fuse the transaction before time t. Now, what else can be happen? If the buyer also wants some protection in a fair exchange, then anybody who's selling also deposits some money. Anybody who's buying also deposits some money. So if this fellow does not, if the seller does not give the data, his money is forfeited. If the buyer does not give the money after taking the data, his deposit of BTC or Bitcoins is forfeited. So this is the way which is being done in and can be done in for data sharing using 2-3 things, as you said. It's a fair exchange, it's a timed commitment, it's deposit which is being verified by the blockchain, by the miners. So the entire blockchain is able to enforce honest data sharing and honest paying through fair exchange, which is there where trustworthiness or trustness is implemented through the mining and time commitment in blockchain. So again, for data sharing and for others, you require authentication. So you can, if you say, I want authentication and access control to smart devices or servers, which is our data, which is there in the blockchain. So I want to remove the dependence on the central parties. I don't want central parties to be involved in authentication and access control. And I want efficiency, obviously. So traditionally, we used to have role-based control. As a teacher, I get access to different labs. As a director, I have access to everything. I have, during examinations, I can enter the control room of the examination. If it is not my paper, it's not my, I'm not the, I'm a teacher, but today is not my examination, then I don't get the access. That is context-based. Then capability-based. I am the administrator, so that's my capability, I get access control. So the role-based, for example, I'll give an example. So I can, for example, in role-based, today I'm a teacher. Tomorrow, if I become a student in some PhD program, then as a teacher I get access to different labs, but as a student I don't get access to the same labs. Or better still, as a director I am able to look at some files, but as a faculty member the same person does not get to look at the files. But in computers, remember, here a software forgets what he had seen before. As a human being, I can just remember what, as a director, I can see my file and remember then as a teacher that I have seen this file. But a software would forget what he has seen in one role when he assumes or it assumes another role. So this is some role-based access control. But when we have blockchains, then we can define the access policies in smart contracts. What is a smart contract? It's just a program, by the way. It enforces certain type of control, certain type of program flow, certain type of control flow. So the access policies can be defined and can be used to generate several kinds of transactions. And for example, T policy, T access, and T queries. So what kind of transactions need to be generated? For example, I need to have a T policy which includes predefined access policies. You can have T access for access management in different roles. I can request for access through an access query. That's all we want. We want to access. We want to do access management. We should have some access policies. And for that, in a blockchain, we can issue different types of transactions. So a new entity enrolls into the IoT for the first time. It gets a public key, and we define what kind of power it will have, what kind of access it will have. It will have just access to the entire system, to the servers, to the edge, to the cloud, or it will have just access to the IoT device data only. Or what is the extent of its access? So will it have access only to the ECG data, or ECG data and EMG data? It will have access for 1 hour, it will have access for half an hour. What is the access policy? So we'll generate a public key, automatically it will be generated and given, which will there, and the smart contract on the blockchain would be containing all his access policies. So for that, we'll have an T-access transaction put into the blockchain. Later, when the entity needs to access the system, so he's like Bluetooth. He has an open authentication. His authentication is done, but he cannot access anything. So what happens when he wants to get the access and authorization to the IoT system? Is already authenticated. So there is a query generated again, which is using a T query. And then the transaction is verified with a public key, and the authorization that he has asked for will be approved by the miners who will verify and put it on the block. So everything is hashed and put in the block. It can just define your access policy. Your authentication is done in the first stage when you are given a public key. Authorization and your role is defined through T-access. Then a when you want to access the system, you can have a T query which will be verified, and you will get access as per your authorization, and that will be authorized, and then the transaction will be approved, and then you're authorized to access certain part or all the part of the data or the servers or the cloud or the device itself in the IoT system. So this is a repetition of whatever I've told you. So I want to share services and properties. So for example, blockchain is also put into, for example, for sharing in services in a smart city. So for sharing a business model, for example, I have properties, I wish to have rooms like OYO rooms, or I wish to have rooms like Airbnb rooms. So I can do that as well. So in a smart city, I can authorize people, I can authenticate people and provide services. So the sharing business model improves both the cost and the conservation of resources. So this is something which a blockchain can be used to establish trust between dynamic group of strangers. So this is similar to data sharing or identical to data sharing, which we have already seen. But instead of sharing data, I am sharing physical spaces. So I go to a smart city, I want a vehicle or I want a room, I want something stuff at a lower price. So how do I establish the trust between a stranger is walking into the city and my smart city, and how does he really trust me? So there have been applications which have been, let's see the other slide so that you are able to understand. So I am a supplier of a room. I manage my Airbnb rooms, or I am supplying so somebody, or I am supplying some service. So what happens? The suppliers make a deposit on the blockchain and claim the self to be shared with at price P. So I have a room, I wish to share it, and I put it on the blockchain. Unless the claim is cancelled, if nobody claims it, I can get back my deposit. The customers make a timed commitment. As before in data sharing, now I'm sharing physical spaces and services, and value P prime when they need the service. Obviously, I make a deposit which is larger than the original deposit which is made by the supplier. And if the customer pays back P to the supplier after enjoying in time T, the deposit can be placed back into her account. Otherwise, you forfeit a larger amount than what you enjoyed. However, if you do not commit your money, you have not enjoyed. So you don't pay anything. So there is a German company called Slock. You can visit the site slock.it, which offers similar features of, so example, it has said that Airbnb will be fully automated accommodation using this particular blockchain based automated solution. So nobody needs to call you. They have committed some money on the blockchain. If you want to enjoy Airbnb, you also make a deposit, and then you enjoy the facility. While coming out, there's a time commitment. If you do not take enjoy the facility or use the facility within time commitment, you get back your money. So nobody can cheat anyone, and the machines are talking without somebody on the other end using a human being reserving property or room for you. Then, can we manage the IoT devices using blockchain? The answer is yes. Let's see. So we have so many small devices. I think there will be trillions of devices. So everybody is communicating. So everybody needs to have either IPv4 address or IPv6 addresses. But if the devices are very, very large, these address spaces may get congested, may be limited. So it can be observed that why not use the 160-bit identification address, which is given to you as a public key. Every device is a public key, which is based on elliptic curve cryptography based public key identification address, which is 160-bit, which is very, very large. And we can use this particular public ID for communication as well. Instead of using a 48-bit Ethernet address, which is quickly getting exhausted, or this particular communication address, because you will not always be using the network address. You may be locally transmitting within your own LAN, which does not really waste the IP address. So I can use my 160-bit identification address, and this will hide me and provide me privacy as well. So as the number of devices keep on proliferating, then the devices are coming and they are dying and going back, then traditional client server model is difficult to handle, because nobody is informing the TCP/IP server that, okay, I am getting exhausted, I will not be on the blockchain anymore, or I'll not, this particular IPv6 address or IPv4 address is becoming redundant because my device is dying. So in a blockchain system, smart devices can be issued a unique key pair when they enroll for the first time. The public keys can be stored on Ethereum or blockchain. Corresponding private keys would be there on the devices. And now the devices are identified by their public keys, which can be a pseudonym. How is a pseudonym given in networks? Your address is hashed by and signed by an authority. But here, public keys can automatically act as a pseudonym to protect your privacy. The devices can communicate with each other, authenticate the transaction by signing it with public key, which can be verified by the private key. So as in blockchain, we can, because your public key is stored on blockchain, you cannot really change it, it's immutably stored. So devices can, so everybody knows that there's an unknown authorized authenticated entity who's using this public key private key pair. So you don't need a centralized authentication. Somebody who wishes to use your data, you can sign and give authorization. So when now the devices need to update the embedded framework, very easy, no network, no TCP/IP needs to be invoked. The blockchain can easily do it. So in the traditional client server model, you need to have a DHCP server or something of that sort. And that's a security problem. But here in the blockchain model, the location of the firmware is there in the blockchain. So the devices can automatically download the update and install it as a preset. For example, now I'm talking of industrial IoT. In industrial IoT, you have a blockchain. Suppose oil and gas blockchain is there. Or we have an IoT which is actually generating data as to, for example, the petrol trucks, the tankers, the ships which are carrying, all become part of the IoT. And they are a part of the industrial IoT. So the blockchain can help us. So what happens today, if India wishes to buy oil from somewhere, it gives a middleman who gives a letter of credit. The letter of credit is physical, the documents verified, and then the actual petrol or the petroleum is transferred. This can be automated. So a blockchain can help us buy from unknown, untrusted oil seller. So the blockchain can help shorten the paper trail. And by the way, even our own country, the ONGC is actually adopting a blockchain-based supply chain for oil, and how it is monitoring every entity through an IoT. So it's an industrial IoT where every petrol tanker, every ship carrying millions of tons of crude oil is a part of the same IoT, which is connected to the blockchain. So the blockchain is helping the supply chain, is helping in supply chain management. So at every point, the entity needs to update the position of a transaction because it goes through different governments, this, that, and puts it on the blockchain to know about the device. When the owner of the device is changed, for example, the device is, a tanker is resold or a plane is resold, Jet Airways plane goes to Indigo, for example, the key pairs are reissued, which can be kept as a record on the blockchain. Again, as I told you before also, in access control, we have different types of access control, and this access control is difficult, which can be solved using the blockchain. So there's the main idea in all blockchain solutions is that we do away with this centralized authority, which is which is actually creating the problems of single point of failure, non-trustworthiness, scalability, and we use IoT to solve this problem. I'll just show you one example of how this is being done and how smart contracts are being used for this particular access control. So I'll show you a framework, which is a smart contract framework, which consists of three different contracts. One is the access control contract, one is the judge contract, and third is the register contract. Let's see how do we do it. So I know that this is going to be a little difficult, but let's see. So the access control contract, which is provides an access control method for every subject object player. And let me show you the figure so that you are able to understand. This is a smart contract system. Here are the different access control ACCs. Here is a judge contract which judges whether there is some malicious activity or not, whether somebody is not honoring the smart contract as given. So this particular judge contract is going to do the penalty decision as per agreement, obviously as enshrined in its own smart contract for misbehavior and penalty. Here is the register contract, which allows you to register in different roles. So each access control contract provides one access control method between every subject object pair, implements both static right validation and checks the violation or validation of the whole thing. The judge contract implements a misbehavior judging to facilitate dynamic validation of the access control. And if there is a misbehavior, then it imposes a penalty, which is already there in the smart contract. The register contract stores the information about the judge contract and the access control contract and provides functions to manage the contracts. So it contains so what does the register contract do? It registers the information of the access control and misbehavior judging as well as the smart contract, and also provides functions register, update, and delete to manage these methods. So here it is, a smart contract method which allows different entities to be authenticated and to authorization to access different data, IoT devices, servers, and pay for it. So the access control contract, as shown in figure, is deployed on objects, and it controls what the object can access through the smart contract. The subject object pair, so object is what is being accessed, can agree on a multiple control access method implemented by one ACC. So different files, ACC has a policy list which is there in the blockchain, so it can be verified. You cannot really change it. So it's immutable. So file A resource, it is allowed to read, the permission is allowed. And there are timed commitment. To what time? So there's something program, it is allowed, the entity is allowed to execute, the permission is that it's not allowed, the action. So different access control policy is maintained through the contract. And it also maintains for each subject object method, it also maintains a misbehavior. So it can be blocked. The penalty which is given by the judge contract is also maintained by the ACC. And its hash is maintained in the blockchain. Hence, you cannot cheat. It's immutable. The judge contract implements a misbehavior judging contract, which judges the misbehavior of the subject. It wants to access something it should not access, or tries to access it multiple times like a robot, and determines the penalty. So a smart contract is written in which every action and the result of the action is recorded in a smart contract, which the judge contract implements. Whatever action is taken is stored on the blockchain. And this is something which was shown before also. So this is what is awarded by the judge contract to the ACC contract. So the judge contract maintains a behavior list of every subject, user to sensors. For example, the object is a sensor B, sensor C, and misbehavior is too frequent. And here is sensor C, which always says that I'm failing. So this amounts to a malicious behavior or a misbehavior, and it's blocked for 2 hours. So it doesn't get money. The register control contract manages both the access control and records what is being done by the judging methods in the judging contract. And it maintains a lookup table, registers the required information, and executes all methods. So there are different methods. It has seen what has been done, and it records it immutably in the blockchain. So what is happening? I am able to do everything without a centralized, trusted authority. That's the idea which we have here. So I'm not explaining this, but here is a gateway, and a subject can call the blockchain. As you can see, the subject can get the ACC by requesting to the blockchain, and all its information is recorded on the blockchain all the time. The misbehavior is recorded, the penalty is recorded, the access control is recorded, everything is recorded, and the subject once gets the ACC, requests the access report, which is recorded on the blockchain, which then through another ACC gives it to the access control, and there can be local interactions. So all actions of access control, misbehavior, the RCs are recorded. Simply, an object can also call the access control, get the access, know what are the different access controls. It can access the gateway and do a local, and any other, as before, any misbehavior or return is done through the judge contract. And all this is recorded in the RC, which is the register contract. So everything is being done in a distributed manner. All records are being hashed and put into blocks, which is managed and mined, updated, verified independently by all miners, and everybody can verify. All entities, including devices, can verify whether what is being put into the block is correct or not. And the consensus is reached by some consensus mechanism like proof of work. Not proof of work here is not really used, but some proof of so that you are authorized to append to the blockchain. Finally, my friends, let's talk about privacy, which is very, very important. I look at the privacy. So the IoT, as we know, is for new capabilities and consumer, providing extraordinary new level experience to the consumer. For example, children watch programs on smart television. This is a house or a room. A thermostat maintains 22 degrees Celsius temperature, diverts energy from that room for heating to some other rooms in winter. Their parents issue voice commands to the home computer. They are working. Obviously, if you have installed IoT in your house, you will be working day in and day out. So you issue commands to the home computer to shut off the light or turn off the light. And in the background, a fridge says, okay, let's buy groceries. Tomorrow the parents will not be cooking, so it will buy some pizzas because it's a Monday, it's not a Sunday. So everything is working in the background. But all these services come from a central service provider, suppose, and it processes all the data and sensor data which is collected in the smart home. And this is a privacy problem. So in this centrally connected IoT, where I'm issuing command and goes to a centralized server or 2-3 servers which can collude with one another, then my service, my data is compromised. My privacy is breached. So the privacy issues are immense in IoT. And there are a lot of data which is collected, transferred, stored, and sold, and my privacy is breached. So how do I? So if my privacy is breached, many people will say, I don't want to share my privacy, my private data, so will not take the benefit of IoT. So for the success of IoT, my privacy or the privacy of the consumer needs to be maintained. So how do I do it? I again go to the blockchain. Why? As I told you, the blockchain is built for anonymity and privacy. Everything is private and anonymous there. The entity is privacy is maintained. The transaction privacy is maintained. The receiver privacy is there. How much money you have transferred, whom you have transferred, all things are anonymous and private already in blockchain. Can we leverage blockchain, my friends? The answer is yes. So there is a company called Lola Cloud Company. It's a home intelligence system where users' accounts are stored and protected by smart contracts. So there's no human being in the loop. All entities are hidden behind their public keys, are pseudonyms. Likewise, there's a company called Cosmos, which aims to horizontally connect blockchains, but connects multiple blockchains so that the contents of one blockchain remains private to the other blockchain. And supply chain solutions are there based on private blockchains, which keep immutable records on the supply chain so that the integrity of the what I'm asking for and what I'm paying for is there without revealing the privacy of the customers. For example, we have a public blockchain, we have requester nodes which are share a public blockchain, and then we have private blockchains. This is a multi-tiered architecture. So we have private blockchains in which the cooperative, for example, this is my extended family and we keep a private blockchain, but we cooperate. Here I can breach my entity. I'm known to everyone, but here I'm not known to everyone. I'm hiding behind my block, my public chain or some anonymity provisioning technique of the public chain. So as I told you, we have public blockchains, we have private blockchains. How do they talk? Without, how do I compute something here? How do I implement a smart contract? My privacy is going to be breached. So a cryptographic technique, my friends, known as secure multi-party computation is used in blockchain for computation between or sharing between or jointly computation of a function between different blockchains. So what does secure multi-party computation do? It enables parties to act in a way that no single party has access to the entire data, and hence it cannot really access what is being computed. The main idea of secure multi-party computation is to jointly compute a function over their distributed input without disclosing their inputs. For example, if you go and read what is secure multi-party computation, my friends, you will find that I want to find out among 10 friends who has the maximum salary. But I don't want to disclose my salary. Nobody wants to disclose their salary. So I can do a secure multiplication, secure computation so that we know what is the maximum salary, but nobody knows the maximum salary. So this can be done by secure multi-party computation, though we don't have time to really go through secure multi-party computation. But the idea is you can jointly compute a function in a distributed manner without, and everybody's inputs are required, but nobody gives his input. So there is a blockchain already there, which is called Enigma. So it's a blockchain is combined with secure multi-party computation networks, where the blockchain network contains the hashes, as usual, contains the blocks. The SMPC network contains the data, whose hashes we split into different nodes. So the whole information is scattered onto different entities. Entities only have a part of the data, do not know what is the data. So everybody thinks that he has a random piece of data. No party has the entire data. The computation can be done using an algorithm which gives you the output without telling you the input. Individual inputs for that matter. So there is a blockchain model called HOC, which is a blockchain model for privacy preserving smart contracts, which uses a snark proof. This is what is used. This is a zero knowledge proof. And the zero knowledge proof itself needs a common reference string, which takes multi-party computation. Let me give you an example before I close, wherein two blockchains, a public blockchain or a private blockchain or two private blockchains, can talk to each other using secure multi-party computation without revealing the individual inputs. So what is there? Let me show you the figure. There is a VanChain blockchain, for example. There is an Ethereum blockchain. Let this be a private blockchain. Let this be Ethereum blockchain be a public blockchain. So user A has an asset which is called ETH, which it wishes to transfer. This particular thing is a function which is required to be computed, which is done by these storeman nodes. And the data is randomly scattered on these storeman nodes. They compute a function without knowing the individual inputs. And this can then be given, the entity ETH is computed, it's unlocked and given. So this guy does not, the transferring entities do not know what is being transferred. So let's see how the protocol works. So in VanChain network, if a user wants to send an asset from one block of the Ethereum to a user on VanChain blockchain, then what does it do? At first, the asset value is logged in the account using smart contract. So this logged in account holds control of the funds. So I wish to transfer, so I can do a timed commit that I'm going to pay. The equivalent token is taken. So it makes this particular user makes a timed commit. You on the blockchain that will pay, and the equivalent token of the logged account is given to another user B of the VanChain. So user here is doing a time commit on the user B. So when the user B wants to converts its hidden WTH to the actual asset, the lock amount is released. It releases the money which goes and the equivalent portion of the WETH is burnt so that it can get the ETH. So this, as soon as this makes a commitment on the blockchain that it wishes to use it, it transfers the deposit. The ETH is burnt using the computed using the secure multi-party computation. And these locking and the unlocking of the asset value is done by the SMPC. The data transfer is done by the SMPC. So VanChain has a concept of storeman nodes. The storeman nodes, they work together and perform the locking and unlocking. So these are locking and unlocking of the asset value. So these storemen mostly work together to create public key and private keys related to the locked account. This shared account has a private key. So if you want to transfer the asset, what do you want? You want to transfer the decryption key of the asset. So this account, shared account private key is scattered among all the storeman nodes. And to unlock the account, at least M threshold of storeman concept need to contribute their shared secret to generate the signature together. So once they pull in at least a threshold of the storeman, pull in their shared secret, then we generate the key for unlocking, then it is unlocked and the signature is generated, and using multi-party computation, and then that key is given for the data. So this unlocks the data. So what is happening? First, the user B commits that he is going to give a time commitment. This is already generated and this is given to him, verified by the storeman nodes. Once it makes a deposit, it gives the key. So there is no centralized entity. Everything is being done on the blockchain. And hence any communication between the public and private blockchain can be done without revealing the privacy or without having a central entity. And that can be done, most importantly, can be done in an automatic fashion. So, in addition to this, protocols which are there, the blockchain itself has a lot of privacy enhancing or privacy preserving properties, or it does privacy preserving. For example, for entity privacy in IoT, blockchain uses pseudonyms. Usually blockchains are there. Sorry, publicly is there in blockchains, which can be used. And as we had seen, this can also be used as pseudonyms, which can be used for communication as well. We know that's not very strong. So we have different cryptographic techniques. For example, we have linkable ring signatures. So ring signature can be used to give K anonymity, and ring signature can be used to sign any transaction. So if I sign, nobody knows who has signed. Then I can use a ring signature to preserve my privacy. I can use, then there can be a linkable ring signature. If I do it multiple times, then I'm linked to the old public key, but nobody knows which public key, but it knows the same entity is signing over and over again. So I cannot really sign over and over again. Then for searching data, the data can be kept in encrypted form. So homomorphic commitments are already there. If you say how much money is to be transferred, but I don't want to tell you how much money, what is the money, except for the sender and the receiver, then homomorphic commitments already exist in blockchain to enable this. Then we have zero knowledge proof and zero knowledge argument to convert any information into a transaction. So I can say that, okay, I'm ready to transmit. I have so much of money, or the generator of data can prove that he has data without showing or without giving the data, because data showing is data giving. It's not like a ring that I can show but not give. If I show the data is gone. So I give the proof that I have data to the potential buyer through a zero knowledge proof without showing the data, which can preserve my data or which can convert any information in a transaction into a random one by using some zero knowledge proof, which is already there, my friends, on the blockchain. Similarly, for data privacy, we can encrypt the data here. Again, I can have non-repudiation mechanism, which is necessary. I have transferred the data. Somebody says you have not transferred the data or service. So in industrial IoT, we have non-repudiation solutions in which a person, if I give data, I cannot say I can prove that I have given data. Somebody can give false data and then say I have not given false data. So non-repudiation is very, very important in industrial IoT, and this can be used in industrial IoT, especially industrial IoT, where we have malicious, untrusted clients, untrusted service providers, and we can use blockchain-based non-repudiation. Again, it is powered by a smart contract management system. I'll not go into details of this, but the whole protocol or arbitration protocol, somebody giving malicious data or somebody not giving data after taking money, or somebody who has taken money not giving data, can be solved using non-repudiation protocols on the blockchain. I think I have taken more time than I should have, and I owe you an apology that I came a little late. But thank you, Dr. Anju, for giving me this opportunity. I am ready to take any questions. Hello, organizers.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So participants, if you have any queries, you can ask.
Ma'am, it seems that there are no queries.
Might be, sir. Okay.
But if
Thank you so much, sir, for the
data
valuable inputs
also,
and
it is
insight on IoT and blockchain. So there is a question in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. If a connected IoT device is compromised, can a blockchain detect it? See, if the blockchain, the device is compromised, the blockchain will not be in a position to detect it. But you'll have to tell what type of compromise, because every device has to give a proof of space. So if it is compromised but still giving good data, fine. If it is giving bad data, then we know that IoTs are usually redundant. And there are multiple IoT devices sensing the same data, same environment. So we can use that to know whether the data which is coming out is malicious or not. Now, as I told you, cloning is something which is a problem. So data is compromised, and what the person says is that he takes away your device, clones and places multiple identical devices which give false data. For that, what we do is, usually for such devices which can be cloned, there is a location based private keys. So if you change the location, then we know that the device is that device has been compromised. And by the way, it doesn't really require the blockchain. There are other excellent methods for finding out whether an IoT device has been compromised or not. So usually the blockchain is limited to privacy provisioning of the device, or for data sharing, for data trading, for access control for data, and for entity privacy. It does not is not really used for attacks on IoT, which like compromising the IoT devices or something of that sort. Yes, ma'am. Yes, a denial of service attack is, again, as I told you, we already have excellent methods for overcoming these attacks. For example, the devices, the blockchain itself can be attacked. Like for example, we have an Eclipse attack there, but then we try to overcome it. But denial of service attack can always be cannot be prevented. However, it can be detected using the blockchain. So when you fire a query or somebody commits a transaction, does not do it, then we can prove that if somebody has made a timed commitment and is not able to get it, then we can prove and think that find that there is a denial of service attack. But prevention, I don't think it's possible through blockchain as of today. Yes. Any other questions?
Participants, if you have any questions, you can ask.
Any research question would be most welcome. I think, ma'am, there are no more questions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for this
joining with us.
Opportunity, and I once again pardon me for being some 5-10 minutes late, because I was thinking that my session was from 12. Sorry, ma'am. I don't think that should happen. But have a nice day. Have a nice round of sessions, and I think wonderful seminar. I should congratulate you on this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You can get my mobile number. I'll type here: 9450965336. So here goes. So, ma'am, if there are no more questions, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Participants, you can fill up the feedback link, feedback form. This is available in the chat window. And afternoon session will start sharply at 2 p.m. And you can join with us for valedictory function. Thank you.